Well, I'm sitting here talking to Wesley Dean, who is in Nashville. I'm in Sydney. It's your Sunday nights, my Monday morning. I'm post Tamworth and a bit wiped out, but you're looking fresh as a daisy. Hello, Wesley.
Thank you. Thanks, Bobby. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks so much.
We are talking ahead of the release of your album Unknown, which I've had the absolute great pleasure of listening to over and over again by choice. This was not a
Oh,
this
really?
was
Oh,
not a
beautiful.
chore for me.
Oh,
And I
thank
wanted
you.
to start by acknowledging that you took a long break from creating music, several years, in fact,
Yeah.
before you created Unknown. And preceding that, you'd been involved in music since childhood. You started singing Jackson 5 songs.
Yep.
You had a whole trajectory through your teens. You were gigging
Yep.
before you were even of legal drinking age. Given
Yeah.
that in agriculture it's a good idea to let fields lie fallow so that they can remain fertile, do you now look back at this time when you were creating music and think that was a good fallow period for me to have?
It was. I've taken a lot of breaks from it, literally because it's so intense when I do it, when I do write and record. It would have been impossible for me to spend my last 20 plus years now um, with the same amount of intensity that I use when that I throw into making a record or writing a song or something. So I guess naturally, without knowing it, I needed to step away a few times. But the major one was when we moved out of Sydney in 2015, and we just had our son Willow. He was 2 at that time, and I had a friend who lived on the Sunshine Coast, and it was like she used to work at Sony too. She was my one of my and is one of my best friends. We met through being on the Sony label, and she was like, always, you should move to the Sunshine Coast. And I'm like, well, I'm a musician. I need to be in Sydney, And as soon as I made that decision to move up there, when I finally caved and took her advice, we found a different pace of life, which then opened up a whole bunch of creative endeavors for me. And I set up a little studio in my house and just sort of did anything I could to sort of keep paying the rent and paying the bills and whatever. I toured a lot, and I did a bunch of really great, exciting things. I was in Rolling Thunder Vietnam, which was like a stage show, and I played a war veteran, and I did a bit of acting. I dabbled on a lot of things. I did 1 or 2 national tours a year, but I never really was doing my thing. I felt like I was sort of just working for everyone else, and which was a fantastic experience. But what I really wanted to do was do my own thing, and that's been a real huge journey for me since I was really young. So it's come full circle now, and I've ended up in Nashville, which is a whole other crazy story. From the Sunshine Coast to Nashville. 3 years ago, if you told me I was living in Nashville, I would have laughed. It's crazy how it's all happened and worked out. And in the time of COVID and moving countries and getting special permission to leave the border and coming over here because the opportunity was just too good to sort of try and say no to out of fear of COVID or whatever it was. Like, it was just literally like someone else up there had a plan for me, and I just had to kind of trust that, I think. And so we're here. I've been here a year now, and it's been just music, and I've written an album in that time, and it's really thrilling, actually, because it's really the most exciting time of my life, really, in music, because I feel like I've just started all over again, and
Right.
with a whole body of work that I'm really proud of, because it's so autobiographical for me, and it's literally the last 20 plus years of music apprenticeship almost into this record, So definitely done my 10,000 hours.
I would suggest so. You probably did them before you turned 20.
Yeah.
But it's, not everyone would acknowledge that role of the apprenticeship, I guess. It would be really tempting, given all the things you've done in your career, as I said, from a young age onwards, to think, oh, well, you know what? I know a lot. I don't need to still learn. And sometimes I think it's tempting to think that, and then you can always have that beginner mind, I guess, again. And that seems like that's what you have.
I think it's a shame when people stop learning, because it is all about that. Music it's 12 notes, but there is a myriad of infinite possibilities with those 12 notes that you can achieve. You know, you can achieve anything with music. It's amazing. It's a universal language. So if you do stop learning, then you stop communicating. And, you know, like I said to you just before we started the interview, I really hope this record adds value to somebody else. Like it's written from my point of view, from, you know, depression, anxiety, the dealing with suddenly sort of being a kind of a public person all of a sudden for a little bit in my life there, and trying to work out where I stood in all of that. And then, you know, childhood stuff, and my mum and dad's divorce, all this stuff that I had to sort of, you know, and I've always been leaving somewhere in my life. Like since I was 14, I've always had to leave somewhere or someone that I loved. And that's just been my journey. I guess I don't know what that is, but that's just been my story. And so this album really represents that, but the catharsis of all the struggles, but in turn, seeing it from the bird's eye view and looking at it as all one big blessing, you know, because I have been very blessed in my life. I mean, man, I get to play music and write music and hang out with really amazing, incredible musicians and songwriters, and, you know, people that I've always looked up to. You know, I've met some of my heroes in life. You know, it's just been an incredible life so far. So, yeah, without thinking that this album is a sad album, because it's definitely not. It's a celebration of all those hardships, I guess, and those challenges, I guess, in my life that I've had. So
yeah, I wouldn't say it's sad at all. My impression listening to it was that, yes, you were seeking to explain and understand your life, but also life in general. And in that sense, therefore, you were trying to find commonality with the listener. So I'm wondering if you feel that, I mean, I know the album's not out yet, but you have released some singles. I'm wondering if you feel that relationship with the listener.
I know the last song that I released, Pages, has really, it's a 3-minute piano song. And I wrote it only a few months ago. It's one of the newest songs on the record. But I know that when I did release it, I got a lot of messages from, you know, some friends and family, and also people like fans and people all over the place were just really resonated with that song. And I think it's just because it's pretty honest. I mean, I'm very honest anyway. I'm always wearing my heart on my sleeve with music. I've always done that ever since I was, you know, 12 when I started writing songs. So I can't not do it. I have to be honest. Otherwise it just feels fake and phony to me. And I'd rather not sing that for the rest of my life. I'd rather sing something that actually represents some timeline of my life or something. So yeah, so Pages and Hello, I Love You, Goodbye is another song I've just released. And that is like when the sun comes out. If you look at the album as a one-man show, which I kind of keep saying, it's like a 14-track one-man show almost, because it's almost a chronological order of songs, which was definitely not deliberate, but the way it sort of runs. Hello, I Love You, Goodbye is when the sunshine starts coming out and everything's going to be okay, you know, like the arc of the show. And so that one is, for me, the production value of that song, you know, it took a little bit to get right, because all the backing vocals and, you know, it's pretty, it reminds me of, you know, some of those Disney films where the cartoon Bluebird, you know, like, you know, I don't know, it was a Chevy Chase or something where he's singing the little guitar and he's got all the cartoon animals around him. I can't remember what that is, but it has that sort of thing in my mind where it's very different, because every song I tried to make its own character on the record. So getting back to your question, it does resonate, because I think that every song that I've done, or that I've written on this record, they're all very different. They all address different things. You know, there's a song on there called Leave Adelaide Alone. Now, in America, people are like, what's Adelaide? Like, who's Adelaide? You know, but you know, it's obviously where I was born and where I grew up, and I had to leave there when I was 14 and leave my mom and my sister and my nan and everything. And that, for me, that was pretty big at that time, because man, I hated leaving. I hated, I just loved being home. I'm a real homebody still. And so, it resonates with me, but then other people think it's a girl called Adelaide that I'm singing about. So yeah, you know, it's who knows.
People find their stories in it, and in Pages you do sing about leaving behind regrets that won't let you get on with your life. And I'm wondering, in a way, if writing that song or writing this album is almost like a tabula rasa, just saying, okay, well, I've worked through those regrets.
Yep.
I've done the best I can to manage them and move on, and now I start afresh.
It is. It's a real like forgiveness of my, you know, like trying to find forgiveness for myself. Really, a lot of people don't usually think about that. They beat themselves up over little tiny things that no one would even care about, but in your mind, they're big things that you've blown out of proportion, and you beat yourself up over like not being there for somebody, or not saying that, or, you know, not chasing, you know, not walking down that sliding door and taking that sliding door and realizing you've just hit a brick wall through the choices that you made, and all everything that you when you look back on life. And I think I had a lot of time to do that this year, being away. I think what added to that was leaving Australia, saying goodbye to my mum and dad, although they live in Adelaide and I lived in Sunshine Coast. It was like, oh wow, we felt like we were boarding a spaceship to another planet at that time, because it was February 21. It was COVID, height of COVID, and the borders were shut. We had no idea when we were ever going to get home again. It was like when we said goodbye to my wife's parents, we had a feeling that we might not ever see them, like, because they're a bit older, you know. And so we were like, you know, if anything happens, how are we going to get home? Like, what's the protocol? We hadn't really thought about a lot of that. And then we got to Nashville and realized a lot of the plans that were in place, a lot of them fell through. Right. So I was literally going, wow, what do I do now? And I had to recreate my opportunities again in a much more of a grounded manner, and found the right people around me, and it was baptism by fire. So, you know, that's what Gaslight is about, you know, 40,000 feet up off the ground. You know, it feels like heaven's going to help me now. You know, I'm walking the fire. You're the gaslighter. And I guess I was just talking about myself, really, you know, and trying to make sense of this very strange time around us, but then also in another country trying to create, and there's no touring, there's no, so it was like, it was a little bit mad, you know. It was like, I'm going to come here and I'm going to choose one of the strangest times in history to come and create an album and put myself, but it all worked out, you know. And now I feel like it's all moving towards a positive again. And, you know, that you've got to keep positive. You've got to stay positive and look after your own mindset, because otherwise, if you don't do that, then you're dead in the water, as I say in the song. So yeah. And that's why the album's called Unknown, really. It's just because it was all unknown. Everything was very unknown.
And on your social media, I've been looking at your posts where you have been addressing that concept of unknown and being scared of the unknown. But of course, yes, what you did was embrace a huge unknown, not just moving countries, but also musically unknown, because you didn't know what music was going to come out of this. So I'm wondering if you feel that the unknown is less daunting now than it was a year ago.
It very much so. It's so, I have been blessed over and over again. I guess when you say it's going to work, it just works. Like, you just talk yourself into it almost, you know. Put yourself in the right environments, I guess. But I've got a really great manager now that's been lacking for many years in my life. You know, I've managed myself for a long time, and just these little things that I've had the pleasure of putting in place the last sort of year has really elevated my creativity, because I'm now just focusing on music instead of trying to work out all the other things that come along with, you know, being a musician these days. So really lucky in that regard. And you know, I've got a bit of touring coming up in the Northeast. I'm going to New York. In the next month I'm touring down in California in the summer here, which is June, July. And there's a lot of exciting things in the pipeline for the rest of the year. And so yeah, it's been awesome. Like it just keeps getting better and better now. So yeah.
Well, I think you created it because you created a fantastic album. And when I started listening to it, the phrase that came to mind was full spectrum, which just popped into my head. It's like, this is like a full spectrum experience, not just emotionally, but musically. And I'm wondering if before you started recording it, if you had a fixed idea of how you wanted the album to sound, because the sound is cohesive yet varies between songs.
Yes. I think I've always done that where it's been, one of my favorite albums is the White Album, and it's all over the place in sonics, and so I can't write the same song, the same sounding song 12 times. I've just never been able to. I have to be weird somewhere along the line and put some weird things in and change it up and change up the, I've always been like that. And sometimes I feel like it could be to my detriment. Like if only I wrote the one song that sounded similar, I might be able to pigeonhole myself a little bit more and make life easier a bit more, but I've never been able to do that, and I guess, so, but to answer your question, I've never, ever thought of, it didn't even feel like I was putting together an album. It was literally, it was capturing lightning in a bottle sort of thing. It was just go, go, go. I was writing a lot. I was everything was very uncertain and up in the air. And it was just like, I've got to get this right. I've got to get this record done, and I've got to capture a moment. And the only natural thing for me was to write about what was going on and the experiences or what I was thinking about, in terms of looking back, like I was saying before, looking back and, beating yourself up about regrets and feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And all these little phrases through my life, I just it was like my Rocky moment, just like, yeah, I'm 39. I'm going back into the fire with a whole album. And what am I going to do? I'm just going to strap on my gloves and keep boxing. So,
and run to the top of the steps in Philadelphia.
Yeah, that's it. No, I will do that now. I've got to do that now.
and back to the idea of unknown. Of course, in Australia, you people in the industry, you knew producers, you knew musicians, that sort of thing. Moving to Nashville, that was a different industry to get your head around. But when it came to creating an album, so how did you start to assemble the people you wanted to work with?
It was amazing. I traveled to Nashville 12 years ago on a writing trip, and I met he's still a really good friend of mine. His name's Tommy Hendrickson. He's in the Hollywood Vampires, and plays with Alice Cooper. And Tommy and I, every time he comes to town, I go to the show and I, catch up with Tommy, and he's always like, man, you got to get to Nashville. We got to get to Nashville one day, man. And he's like, calls me Westworld. So we've always had this great rapport, and working with Tommy is like working with like another kind of me. It's a bit crazy sometimes and a bit manic and whatever, but it gels, And so Tommy, so when I got to Nashville, the business plan that I initially had through COVID and I was working on to get here, and I had a bit of a plan in place, that all kind of was a little bit more like smoke and mirrors. It was a little all over the place. So I had to take kind of matters into my own hands and go, hang on, I've got to make this work, because I've got kids and I've got my wife here, and we've just left our country and we can't get home, and man, what am I doing anyway? And this music world is always uncertain anyway. So it was just a whole bunch of stuff. So I out of the blue, I emailed Tommy one early morning, late night, and said, man, I'm in Nashville, and he's like, you got to meet my mate, Justin Cortaloo. So Justin, I had met 12 years ago, and it was like time folded when we got together. And I went over to his studio, Soul Train Studios here in Nashville, and it's an incredible studio, and we just got to talking about different music and caught up on the past and had a laugh about, 12 years ago, me, sort of thing. Like, man, the last time I saw you, you were like, you were writing different music and, you were sort of a bit all over the place, trying to, I guess, just learn as much as I could at that time. So we reconnected, and then I said I had a bunch of these songs and I was working on this album, and I hadn't really thought about this album yet. I was just sort of saying I'm working on an album, but at the time there was not much music that I'd written and whatever. And it all just wrote itself. Like since that meeting with Justin, he had his, he's really plugged in here in the scene. So, we had incredible legends that came in and played on the record. I mean, Adam Schoenfeld, who's just like one of the greatest guitarists of all time. I would say, plays with Tim McGraw and everybody, everyone. So like, you ask these guys, who do you play with it? And it's like, literally like, they don't say much, but if they did, it would be just, the list would be too long to. So Fred Eltringham, who plays drums for Sheryl Crow, I could name drop all night sort of thing, but it was just an amazing experience to be around these guys, and they were so gracious and down to earth, and you wouldn't even know that these guys are like rock stars in their own right, and it was an incredible experience just being in the room with these guys playing my music and asking them, do you think it's any good? And like, yeah, man, it was just, so it was cool because like, here I was in this room with these legends that, 30, 40 years of experience of working with just about everybody. I mean, Justin's worked with Paul McCartney and, Taylor Swift and all these guys, like, amazing CVs on all of them. So I felt like a very small, very small sort of person in the room, just sitting there, just taking it all in. But I'm just so proud of the way it happened, and it was just, there was no tension and no ego and it was just a real dream, really. So great.
And that does translate to the recording, I think, because it does sound, like I said, it's a full spectrum experience, but there's also a certain lightness and joy to it, even though some of the songs do have heavier lyrics. But as I said, it's not a sad album at all. And I often wonder for songwriters if it's a little weird when you create that song and then a producer and other musicians come in and interpret the song, and you're sitting there going, well, hang on, is that what I intended? I don't know. Were there any moments like that?
I demo them up pretty much the way I want to hear them. So I write, most of the parts I have in my head, like bass part and, even the drum fills, because drums are, in my opinion, are melodic. It's like, I love Ringo Starr added so many great melodies to the Beatles songs that nobody ever talks about, Come Together and whatever, all these great hooks and lines in songs can be rhythmic I think most of the time, to be honest. So just all those little intricacies that you have to think about now when going into a studio, especially working with some of these guys, it was like, man, I have to really make sure that I know what the ins and outs of these songs, because but then when it's left up to interpretation, if you get the right guys in the studio, they really know how to, they just put it, tweak it up to another level sometimes, which is amazing. So so you got to, I think for me, I guess I'm a little bit of a control freak in in the musicality sense, but when I do hand it over, I do love to watch other people interpret, like the song Anxiety was more like a Motown kind of song on the record, but then it sort of became like a 50s sort of high school dance song on the album. But then I'm singing about anxiety, but this has this kind of real catharsis about it, which is like happy, sad thing where it's upbeat and kind of like a 50s dance hall, like a Back to the Future sort of thing, when he's about to play the guitar, it kind of feels like it's a song from that era, but then I'm singing about, anxiety, like, which was something that's been very prevalent in my life since I was really young. So it's a very hard on the sleeve kind of song lyrically. So yeah, there's, like I said, there's all these different characters within the album that I'm proud that I've been able to nail down and have on record now. You know, it's like, yeah, like you said, it's like a full spectrum thing, or, you know, like I've finally kind of let it live on, like let it live as a piece of art. You know, I feel like I've been striving to write some of these songs for a long time, but never really nailed it in this way, you know. And my friend said here once in Nashville, he was like, take a big idea and make it smaller.
Right.
And as soon as he said that, I never thought about songwriting like that, because, you know, sometimes I have these symphonies, and I write film score music and stuff just for my own enjoyment, really. Yeah. And I love to, you know, go through genres and write different genres of music and things as well. And but when he said that, it really, wow, it almost took a lot of the pressure off. I was wow, like it felt like you get this big concept and you make it smaller, and I just found that I don't know whether that's going to help anyone else out there, but I found that really helpful as a creative.
Well, I think, yes, as you said, it does take the pressure off, because often I think there's that imperative to, you know, be big, be ambitious, tell it to a lot of people, and that can really obscure what you're trying to do in your work. And simplifying it, I think, is
absolutely, yeah, you know, exactly right. So that's what this is about, you know, getting the message across, and the music and the message is very important.
I'll ask one last question because time's flown, and it is a question about you as a singer. Therefore, as a songwriter, you come in with that song, you've demoed it, but you're such a powerful singer, and your voice is so central to the recording of this album that, I mean, I'm sure if it had been other people's songs, you would have done the same job. But in that recording process, and also standing there as a songwriter, at what point do you start to think about how you're going to sing, how to deliver those songs vocally?
Yeah, so that was my voice has changed quite a bit. It's gotten bigger. Octaves have gotten, you know, I've got 3.5 octaves or something or whatever now, and since, you know, if you look back to kind of like 10, 12 years ago, it's got a lot of thickness to it, and so even the last year it changed a little bit again, and so vocally, it's very important to me to deliver it in a way where people get to I want people to really know that I'm singing every line like it's the last time I'm ever going to sing again, kind of thing. Like it's important to convey the message as much, you know, as strong as I can. And I've never really thought about singing because I've always done it since I was really young. But it's funny you asked that question, because this time round I kind of did, in a way. I was like, how, you know, because my voice has changed, I think, you know, for the better. It's just got this kind of like bit more sort of raspiness to it, I guess, and it's a bit thicker, and it's a bit more honest as well, I think. Maybe I've come into my own in that way. So I did think about it, because it feels like a new thing to me. You know, the delivery of some of the songs were different to how I would have done it a few years ago. And I think that's just like growing up and experiencing everything, and then, you know, getting to a point where, yeah, I feel like I can stand on my own confidently and have my own message, and not sort of feel like I'm doing it to prove anything, or it's, you know, it's somebody else's idea that I had to sort of, you know, convey, or like it, you know, I'm not doing this, you know, for it feels like it's the right intention now, you know, and so it's when I was, you know, 12, 13, 14 in those pubs and clubs in Sydney and playing those little bars, and late at night handing out my demo CDs and cassettes and things, and I didn't really have much of a plan, but I knew that it was the music that I pursued, not the notoriety for the music. It was just like, I do this strange thing. I write these songs and I sing these songs, and so that's been my whole life, and I've always pursued that more so than anything. So it, and then along the way, as I got more familiar with industry or whatever it was, it all sort of came a little bit chaos there for a little bit, I think, just because I needed to grow, but I didn't know how or which way to grow, Yeah. So it feels like full circle now, that after the hiatuses that I've had and all the different breaks and having kids and being married and life, real life happens in between all of that. You get to sing for somebody, like my kids now, and my wife and my family, and thinking about my legacy and all that sort of thing. So it all of that does add to your performance as an artist, and I see some artists, they run from all of that. No, I'm not having kids, or whatever. But it just only, for me, it enriches the experience of your creativity and your work,
Well, this is a very rich album. The album is Unknown. Wesley, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you and to hear about the album, and enjoy your US tour. I hope you will pop down here eventually to tour this album.
Oh, yeah. To be honest, looking forward to the beach, Aussie beach. You can't, we're so blessed to be Australian.
I completely agree. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.